What's up, plant lovers? I'm Devin Wallien. In this video, we're going to be talking about a beautiful project that my wife and I have been embarking on over the last about 3-4 years, which is restoring the forested area in the back of our property. It's about 3/4 of an acre, and when we moved in here 4 years ago, I could tell this place hadn't been touched for years. There were invasives growing all over it. It was so dense you couldn't see through it. Totally unusable. The invasives were not creating an environment conducive to the native pollinators or wildlife. So we had the thought, number one, we need to get rid of the invasives. We need to make this place usable. And in the process, we discovered an awesome treasure. Once we started removing all of the crap, we just discovered one beautiful thing after another, but there was one particular gem at the very back of the property that we uncovered in the process of this restoration, which I'll share with you guys in a little bit. So we've been actively working on this project for the last about 3.5 years with the goals of, number one, getting rid of all that invasive crap. We don't want the invasive plants. So that was obviously goal number one. And in the process, our goal is also to help rebuild the soil structure and then plant natives, and finally to make it a usable space. Right now, it's just my wife and I here at the home, but we plan to have a growing family. So we want to make this a usable space for both ourselves as adults, but also for the children that we plan to have grow up at this home. So as you can see behind me, the forest floor is pretty nice and cleaned up at this point. That's after 3 years of intense labor removing the invasives. That's absolutely step number one if you're planning on restoring some forested area, is to get rid of those invasive plants. And that starts with identifying which are the invasives and of course which are the natives. Now that's a big process in and of itself. The best solution to do so, I took a lot of classes at a local botanical garden here in my area outside of Westchester, Pennsylvania, Zone 6B, at a garden called Mount Cuba Center. They helped me identify the invasives. They also helped me identify the native plants, and that was really helped me to create the framework for where I needed to put my efforts. Now, once you have an idea of what is what, now you need to start thinking about how you can actually remove the different invasive plants. Each different plant has a different sort of method that might be most applicable. Now for me, the big ones were the Japanese honeysuckle, the multiflora roses, the Japanese stiltgrass, the invasive barberry. Now for me, what I did was I started with the big guys. The honeysuckle shrubs were huge. So those were the most easy for me to identify. I started just by removing those with my brute force, trying to rip them up out of the soil, but also cutting down the ones that I couldn't, and then painting the tops of those trunks with an herbicide to kill the root system, because if you leave those trunks still alive, they can definitely, and they will absolutely resprout new growth, and you don't want that to occur. Sometimes we have to use herbicides. None of us like it. I don't like using chemicals, but if we want to provide space for our native plants to grow and thrive, we have to get rid of those invasive plants. And sometimes that means using herbicides. So let me show you exactly how I went about using those herbicides to effectively start to get rid of those invasive plants. All right, so of course we always want to use our protective gear as shown in the instructions with our herbicides. Now, take note, we're not using a general all-purpose herbicide like a Roundup. We're using selective herbicides for exactly what we need to get rid of. So this time I'm using a grass herbicide. So I have my pump sprayer for my grass herbicides. I fill it up with a little bit of water just to get it going. And then I put in my specific grass herbicide. This is going to kill that stilt grass as well as the nut grass and other invasive grasses that I have growing. I have to put in exactly 1.5 ounces of the herbicide for every 2 gallons of water, which is what my pump sprayer has. All of these instructions and ratios should be outlined in the instruction manual, just like that. Now, once I have that in, I want to add something called a surfactant. This is going to help the herbicide to actually stick better to the foliage when it's sprayed. So that's going to just make sure that it's more effective. Now, as I spray it, it's not going to affect non-grasses. So that's what we like about these selective herbicides. Once we have the ratio of the herbicide and surfactant put in, we're going to fill up the pump sprayer with more water so that it is nice and mixed up. All right, so now we're good to go. Screw on the top, give it a little bit of a pump, and now it's going to be ready to be used in the proscribed areas. Now, as you can see back here, I have a section of a lot of the Japanese stilt grass as well as the invasive nut sedge, but there's also some other stuff growing here, including an azalea that I planted, some ferns that I planted. When we use this grass herbicide, I can spray this whole area and things that aren't grasses are not going to be affected. So the way I was taught that is will help to utilize the herbicide even more successfully is to first take either a string trimmer or a brush cleaner like this to really cut back those invasives first. Now, idealistically, I would wait about a week before spraying the herbicides, but I'm gonna show you guys right now just how easy it is to do. And the reason that we trim it back first is because that's really gonna basically put them into a survival mode. The plants are gonna be even more weak, so that's going to allow the herbicides to be a little bit more effective. And from there, the goal is to just spray it on to all of that grassy invasive plant material. And the same exact process holds true for all of our broadleaf invasive plants. Then once you've had an opportunity to get rid of the majority, the bulk of that invasive plant life, then it becomes maintenance, which is much easier to do once you've eliminated the majority of that invasive plant life. Now, what to do with all of that refuse, there's really only a couple options. You either have to burn it or you can absolutely chip it up. And that is something that I hired people to do. I would create big piles of the honeysuckle shrubs, the trunks, the stems, all of that stuff. And then I hired guys to come with their big 8-inch chipper, and they would just chip it out, and then I would just allow them to spread those chips on the forest floor, which definitely helps to rebuild that forest floor. And once you've chipped it, you know there's not going to be any viable seeds coming because those seeds have been decimated as well. But it's so important that you do not add invasive plants to your compost piles or to leave them on the ground after you've chop them up, is because they can still go to seed even after they've been cut off from that main plant. Now, this step one is no joke. This has taken me 3 years to get to this point, and I am still working monthly to try to eliminate more and more of the invasives. And that is really, it is, you know, a bit of a mental challenge because it's like something you don't know if you're ever going to get on top of, but you really can. It just takes perseverance and it takes time and patience. So have like a 5-year plan. This is not something you're going to accomplish in 1 year unless you have a small area. I got, you know, with a 3/4 of an acre, this is going to take me consecutive years to really get that invasive population to a stable rate where it's not just proliferating worse and worse and worse each season. So once I had started to get a little bit of a better grasp on the invasive population in the garden, in the forest, I wanted to start making it more of a garden rather than just like the woods. So one of the things that I employed to create more of this forest garden was to remove a lot of the saplings. Now, saplings would be small trees that are only, 3 to 4 inches around or smaller. And if you've ever been to a professional arboretum, botanical garden with a forested area, you'll notice that the trees in those areas are thick and large. And that's because they remove those smaller sapling trees from those forested areas to create that cathedral feeling, to create that really nice, beautiful, airy energy. And not only did I remove those saplings, but a lot of the lower branches I started to just remove with a pull trimmer, and that also just brought the level of plant life up a little higher. And what that has created is created a much brighter, lighter situation for the forest floor. Remember, I'm going to be planting this out with a lot of native plants. I need to have enough sunlight, so that means removing the plants that I don't need in this forested area. Even though they're native trees that are going to be growing and getting thicker over time, I have enough. So I just had to, you have to make decisions. What is your limit? So you can see I removed everything that was about 4 inches or smaller, and I repurposed those felled trunks around my fire pit, and I think it looks pretty cool. So it didn't serve zero purpose, and it has absolutely created a much more light-filled forested area that I can see through without being overly dense, full of small, tiny little trees. Now, by far the biggest investment that I've made in this garden was putting a deer fence. Here in Westchester, Pennsylvania, the deer pressures are intense, and without putting in a deer fence, I would not be able to run this channel. They were eating literally everything, even all my native plants, eaten to the bone. So I really had to, unfortunately, put this deer fence around the property so that I could actually create a space where I can grow the native plants and create this native plant garden. Another thing that I did put in was I put in a box for bees so that I could create a nice hospitable environment for the bees to come and be in. So once I put it in a little bit late this season, so I don't have any bees in there right now, but hopefully next spring they'll be here at the same time that a lot of the native plants that I will be planting up are going to be in flowers. So definitely creating those hospitable environments for the good pollinators while keeping out the pests like the deer. Definitely essential. So as you can see, we put some trails back here, and that is the next thing that you really want to consider: restoring this forest into a usable forested garden is creating boundaries, defining spaces so that it's not just this wild enclave. We don't want it to be a wild forest. We want it to be a restrained forest. No, a forest that we can enjoy. So by creating trails, by creating seating areas, by defining these spaces, creating that structure, it's super important to just give this space a thought out feel. Now, not only is it going to create just some order in the space, but it's actually going to help me to understand where I want to be planting all of the shrubs and native plant life. But for us, of course, we want to make it as natural and Mother Nature filled as possible. So for our borders, for all of this, all of our trails, we're just using fallen stems and trunks and wood that we have accumulated here on our property to create these borders, just to keep it really nice and natural. And I think it absolutely works well. And for us, it gives us a place that, in the evenings we can take a glass of wine or some tea and take a little walk around our trail, and it is absolutely enjoyable. So for us, we put some inexpensive seats that we got for about $50 from Costco back there, and we sit back there maybe once every 2 or 3 months, but it creates a visual destination. And just by simply having seats in certain areas, you're completing the story with those objects. And over here you can see the fire pit that I dug out, and we actually use this all the time, whether it's to just hang out, maybe cook some food on top of a griddle, or to just burn some fallen branches. All right, so I'm about to make a fire pit. After digging like a nice big deep hole, filled it with some nice pebbles for a base layer. and I'm just casually making it nice and even. Oh, it flooded. So I dug a trench, put in a long PVC pipe in there to redirect the water, and now it's dry. Look, and the stones look pretty good too. We have fire, and the pup's having fun. And this, I dug it out. I found a bunch of stones around the property to create the border. I've made some drainage. We have supernatural seating. It's really low key. It's not intrusive, and that's exactly the vibe that we're going for, and also very inexpensive. Now, as you can see, one of the main recurring themes is most of this garden is just based off of our blood and sweat and tears. We're not spending tons of money besides that deer fence. We're just really doing all of the work ourselves. But of course, there's definitely times when you do want to hire people to help you for certain things. For us, it's chipping the wood. We will just accumulate large piles of wood that we need to get rid of, and we'll bring the guys in once every 6 or 12 months to just chip those big piles away. They do it quickly. We use the wood chips. It's really a complete full circle loop. So definitely look for times when you need help and don't feel bad about paying for it, because it really will save a lot of stress and unnecessary wasted energies. And the final step is to plant up your space. If you're restoring a forest, once you've gotten a good handle on those invasives and they're cleared out, you gotta fill that space back up. So for me, of course, I'm gonna be planting 100% natives. I have this beautiful 100 shrubs that I've ordered that I'm gonna be planting up this autumn, and I can't wait to get them in the ground. By planting natives, not only should they be lower maintenance because they are going to be acclimated to your soil conditions, they're typically going to be able to handle your precipitation patterns, but also by planting shrubs, they should be very low maintenance in that sense as well, requiring nothing at all other than ensuring that you give them water for that first couple of months after planting them. But planting natives are going to encourage the native wildlife, the insects, the pollinators, the birds to come into your garden space. You know, you build it, they'll come, promise you. So that's why it's really important that I plant only natives in this natural native forest garden, but also because they will create the correct energy. I want to be able to bathe in this garden. I want to forest bathe in this garden to the most pure way possible. And for me, that means planting natives. So definitely, once you have the area cleared, you got to get plants in the ground. And that is so essential. And then once you start to get plants in the ground, of course, you're going to be needing to add more and more plants over time or propagate, however. But really the only sort of, maintenance that you need to do with your forest garden once you've gotten it to that point of restoration, well, number one, you're going to let all of the leaves fall. Of course, you're not going to clean up any of the leaves. But you will want to keep an eye on the invasive plants, make sure they're not creeping back. Keep on track with those, but that's really all that you need to do once you've gotten to that point. All right, so now let me show you guys what we found while we were in the process of clearing out all of that invasive plant material. We found that our garden has a natural spring on the land. We found that there was a section of our garden that was extremely wet. So we took a hog and we actually, where that natural spring, we found where that spring started. It was the wettest section of the garden. And we just started to dig this channel to connect to the river that's on the other property next door. And we were able to create our own little bubbling brook in the process, which is insanely beautiful. It's incredible, and it totally transforms the energy of this garden by having this beautiful treasure here in the back of the property. You never know what you're gonna find on your garden property. Once you start getting rid of all that junk, you might just find that you have a bubbling brook on your property. And I think that's about all for this video. I hope you found it fun, warm-hearted. This has been one of the most enjoyable but challenging projects that we've undertaken here on this property. Definitely the longest time horizon that I've had to really maintain. And as not a naturally patient person, it's definitely been a challenge for me mentally. But I hope this video creates a little bit of inspiration and maybe a little bit of motivation. And if it does, give this video a like, subscribe to our channel. We have tons of informative plant-related videos on our channel. So definitely take a look, peruse. Maybe you'll find something else that just piques your plant interest. Anyways, thanks for joining me here on Plant Vibrations. I'll catch you guys later. Ciao.